Good morning. It's a wonderful Monday morning, July 12th, 2021 at Prairie Horizons Farm. I'm Mary Jo Forbord, and I'd like to show you around sort of a snapshot of the season. It's been a relatively dry season. We haven't had a lot of rain, so I'll take you on a tour of the gardens and the orchard as is. And here at Prairie Horizons Farm, I farm with my husband Laverne. He and I have been farming together for about 43 years now in this particular place. We've made a number of transitions. Our start into farming was in dairy, and we have transitioned to grass-fed beef. We had 480 acres that is all under permanent cover. We have gradually reduced the amount of row crops that we have so that all of our farm is perennialized except for the few annual vegetables that I will be showing you. But we were inspired by the diversity and resiliency of the tallgrass prairie to make these changes in our farm. And vegetables and fruits are pretty labor intensive. So we have the cattle and also a herd of 17 goats who help us take care of the bulk of our acreage. They very happily eat what the tallgrass prairie and restored prairie provides. And us humans get high quality protein from that deal, but we also need a few fruits and vegetables from the garden. So in the middle of July, what you see right here is our asparagus that has definitely gone to seed. We had a pretty good crop this year. And so now what's happening is the asparagus is it's past bloom, it's regenerating some of its carbohydrate stores. What's going to happen with this year is that we will cut it off after it senesces. And what senesces means is that all of the nutrients go into the roots. Is pretty much done for the season. And asparagus is a great crop because it just kind of comes up on its own the first thing in the spring, kind of gets us enthused for green vegetables again. And it's a heavy feeder, meaning that we will need to put compost on. Weed control is very essential. We are a certified organic farm, so we use all methods of mechanical tillage and also smothering to try to give the asparagus or whatever food crop we're wanting to capitalize on the advantage. So we have an area here in the garden. Our garden strip is about a quarter-mile long, and we're doing some solarization. It's working marginally well, but the idea is to get on top of some of the weeds and make this area ready for the next season. So not particularly beautiful, but Laverne is pretty proud of his potato crop coming up here. We're both very much attuned to eating potatoes. It's one of our favorite foods. I often joke that I'm genetically related to a potato because being of Norwegian descent, there's a lot of foods that are combining, the basic dairy products of milk and butter with potatoes. But potatoes, I would say, are a staple of our ancestors. These particular potatoes I saved from last year, cuttings from them. They're in the bloom stage now. They look pretty disease-free at this point. I don't see any leaf hoppers or potato beetles or anything like that. And we just need to keep the water supplies fairly constant. Otherwise, what happens if you have too much variation in the moisture, if it's dry and then turns wet, the potatoes themselves can form sort of hollows in the middle. It's not anything that's dangerous or a deal breaker, but it's just not quite as appetizing to go into a nice baked potato and have a hollow in the middle. And that's caused by variations in moisture. So right now we've been getting just barely enough rain to get by. We did water earlier in the season. So the potato crop is looking good, and we're right next to one of our pastures here. A few sunflowers just for fun. Watermelons, this is an indigenous seed. It's called Potawatomi storage watermelon. We don't see any fruits on quite yet. We don't go for completely weed free. That's almost impossible in an organic setting, but we're really trying to make sure that the moisture stays at least adequate for the roots of our crops. This is my year to make cucumber pickles, so not quite sure if there's any on this morning, but getting close, getting really, really close. They're flowering. Hopefully there's a good amount of pollinators out and about. Oh, there's little, oh my goodness. There we go. See, that always escapes. Yeah, it's all of a sudden, yeah, we're into cucumber season here. Yeah, and when you find one, you will find more. So farmers markets will be seeing some cucumbers, and along with the rest of the produce that's starting to come in, I'll be preserving and trying to make products that get us through the entire year. So I have my usual groups of recipes, some of which are staples handed down from generation, pickle recipes from my mother and my aunt and grandmother. And here we have a pretty impressive squash crop, I would say. This particular squash, it is from the Miami Indians, and Winona LeDuc named it Gete Okosomen, which I guess in Anishinaabe or Ojibwe language translates roughly into cool old squash. And so what I've done here is try to mimic a Three Sisters sort of approach. And so I've got the Gete Okosomen, I've got the Dakota corn. It looks pretty good. You know, the squash supplies somewhat of a structure for the corn. You can see the corn is well shaded, well protected by the leaves of the squash. And then the other of the Three Sisters, we've got squash, we've got corn, and then to add the legume, what we've got here is a sort of a field pea, which I don't know if it's going to really amount to something or not. So we will hopefully have that coming up. Let's take a look at what the corn crop is doing too. See what stage it's in. I think we can see a tassel right over there. Yeah, it looks like some of the corn is starting to tassel. And hopefully it's going to be tasseling at a time when the field corn is not tasseling. We don't grow any field corn, but pollen can really move up to even 4 or 5 miles depending on conditions. So we don't want other types of corn pollinating this Dakota corn. We really want to have it kept pretty genetically clear as possible. You can see a little bit of the Gete Okosomen squash now starting to come on. So it looks like quite a few blossoms. Here you see a pea. Let's go up here and see if there's some tassels that are starting to get some pollen on. This Dakota corn was stewarded by people of the Upper Sioux tribe. Teresa Peterson and her family gifted these corn seeds to me, and I have been trying to grow them without interference from genetic pollution, and hopefully the timing will be just right this year that we won't have that. This is probably the best Dakota corn crop I've grown, and I'm using a weed method. Our prime problem with weeds is quackgrass, and if you know about quackgrass, it has a very rhizomatous root and can creep in from far away. So what I've got here is a couple of weed mats I'll show you at the end that leave an area for growing in the middle of those weed mats. The squash is just starting to kind of spread out over the weed mat. I'll give you a look from this end. So with it just my husband and I doing the crops and gardens and orchard, we really have to pay attention to how is it that we're going to minimize labor, and weed mats are one of the few inputs we have on our farm. I'll walk you through the raspberry trellis here. And this is our year to kind of redo the raspberries. Right here, these are black raspberries. They're very, very stickery, but they're one of my favorite. And we try to train those up on the line so that it's easier picking. The plant also does quite a bit better. And you see they've got a ways to go yet. These are going to be ready probably in about August. And what they're due for right now is probably a good watering, and then we will be adding a lot of mulch to use the mulch not only for fertility, but also to smother the weeds and again give the raspberries a good advantage. We have several different varieties here, black raspberries, purple raspberries, fall bearing red, no summer ones. It seems like the summertime is a really busy time. By about fall, we can start to again pick some raspberries and have the time to do it. Well, we'll continue on up here. Again, the raspberries are in a state of rejuvenation. By next year, we should have this renovation complete and we will be into heavier bearing of raspberries, but we still hope to get quite a few by September, because what we have to do yet is to mulch and water, and we have plenty of time to do that. They haven't set blossoms or anything quite yet. You can see some of the pasture areas that we have for the cattle. We rotate the cattle around so that they're not too hard on any one area. It really improves the productivity of the land. And then our garden strip just sort of goes right alongside the pastures. This is a patch of horseradish. So I moved my horseradish patch. Ha ha. And some of you who know about horseradishes, you don't really move it. You leave somewhere it was and then you transport some more here. So it can be harvested in the spring, it can be harvested in the fall, but it looks like we might have some horseradish to add to our grass-fed beef. This area that we're walking through, it is a sloping area, so we are trying to reestablish native prairie here. These are some gray-headed coneflowers, and we hope to, really increase the diversity of this. It's not an area that's very conducive to growing, so deep-rooted perennials is a good place to put them in right there. I've learned too to kind of specialize in some crops. Since it's only my husband and me, there's certain times of the year when we can harvest and actually make some products. And this year is going to be tomatoes. You see some zinnias here and you see some kale, an area for planting fall vegetables. I did try some cool season vegetables here, but there was no cool season this year. So thus there were no cool season vegetables. I suppose I could have watered and watered and watered, but I decided that I wouldn't. That's the wonderful thing about Minnesota, is that you can try it again in the fall. A year ago, I had an incredible radish crop. I made something called radish relish, just had an abundance of the most beautiful radishes. Didn't get a one this year. Very little lettuce. The cool crops were really, really hard. We've looked at our squash and our watermelon, cucumbers. Those are all, warm weather crops. So they seem to be doing really, really well this year. But here, these are an atomic tomato. They're cherry tomato. They're beautiful stripes with purple, and I think maybe they're starting to set fruit here. Yeah, if you look right here. See, I think I love cherry tomatoes, and you can just pop them in your mouth. They're a fine treat. They're popular at the farmer's market. And you can see that the leaves are kind of fine on them. We'll get to where my Roma tomatoes are, and organic Roma tomatoes are ones that I'll be using for sauce. But you can see that this is one of these atomic, wow, those are a big cherry. Yeah, we'll see how those turn out. I haven't grown them before, but I'm excited that amount of fruit is already on. And maybe in a couple weeks or less, depending on the weather, we'll be bringing those to the farmer's market. Now you notice the difference in the leaves here. These are the fine leaves. These are indeterminate tomatoes, and those are the cherry tomatoes that I'll be bringing to market. And then these are the aromas. Yeah, there's getting to be a few of those on. All right. Yep, sauce tomatoes. I ran out of tomato sauce, which is just a big no-no for me because I love the versatility of tomato sauce, making all kinds of things out of it during the winter. So I will just have to make sure that these are watered well. And like potatoes, you know, they do best with an even amount of water. Well, just about any vegetable does better with a small, regular amount of water. So then over on this side, okay, this is a bonus question. What is this plant? I don't think there's anything fruiting on it. It's one of my favorites, and it's because the only, oh, there's a tiny, tiny little fruit. If you didn't see it. See that coming? I've lived my whole life in Minnesota except one great year in Louisiana. And so making gumbo with okra was one of the things that I loved to do and brought back with me from my year that I spent in New Orleans. And here we have garlic. You can see those high flower tops. I missed picking a couple of the scapes. And garlic seems to be doing fine. Another one of those cool crops that you can put in the ground in October or November, you know, when you finally have time to do something like that. And then it's up right away again in the spring. So we love those kind of off-season crops, perennial crops, because we really try to spread our workload throughout the season and need to do that. So we've harvested some of the garlic already. But I thought I'd just leave these scapes because they're sort of cute. The reason that we take the scapes off in the first place, they come about, June or something like that, and we snap them off because that directs more of the energy and carbohydrate resources into the bulb. And really that's what we're after when we're growing garlic, is that bulb. So what do we look for? We look for a couple of dried leaves, and this one, you know, there's one dried leaf, two dried leaf. We'll pick this one. I'm gonna need to tug on it here. There we go. Okay, and there's a nice garlic bulb there. Yum, it is so fresh and crispy this time of year. I'm gonna take that home and cook with it. So on the weed mat system again here, to try to help us control the weeds, we've got the garlic and the tomatoes on the other side, and then the wonderful okra. So yeah, that's the one thing with gardening this time of year when it's been this hot, you do need to be out checking. And okra is related to hibiscus. It gets these beautiful flowers on them. But I see there's already, let's see, that's a flower bud. That's not actually a fruit yet. So that'll be coming right along. Okay, so you can see we've got not a huge assortment of crops, and then I've got my little early season garden here too. I also like to try to experiment a little bit. That's a tobacco plant, gets beautiful flowers, attracts all kinds of pollinators. We've got some cilantro that's rapidly turning into its seed crop, coriander. We eat a lot of cilantro, but there is a limit. And see, that's what the leaves of the cilantro look like. I sort of grow it right in with the carrots. There's some carrots here. A few pepper plants. I usually try to grow onions too, peppers and onions and tomatoes, sort of the holy trinity of the sauce. And then here's a project we're just renovating strawberries. I put some cabbage in the middle. It's not doing that great right now. So by next year, you know, there's always next year when you're gardening or farming, then I really hope to have much more of a crop. So next we're gonna walk into the orchard. We'll take a little break here at the end of the garden strip. And again, right along the pasture. So it's kind of convenient for garden checks. You can just drive your vehicle right along the road and see what's ripe, and a drive-by garden. We'll walk up to the windmill here. And the windmill is something that we erected just last December. It's an old windmill. The last time it was erected was about 100 years ago. I always wanted a windmill, and so yeah, proud to say that that windmill is up there and working. Why is it not turning right now? There's a little bit of a breeze. Okay, so now next we'll go into the orchard, and there's really amazing things happening in the orchard this year. We have 75 apricot trees, and apricots are pretty fickle. We're stretching the zone to get apricots. They bloom very, very early in the season, and before the leaves come out, the blooms come out, so they're very susceptible to frost. Well, this year we not only didn't have frost, but we had adequate pollinators. And we have a very unusual thing going on in that it is a bumper apricot crop. However, they're in all various stages of ripeness. Some of them you can see are so ripe, they're just dropping to the ground. And as we walk along here, we'll also find some that still remain green, almost as green as an olive. So these apricots are of not a particular variety. They're sort of a field run variety, so to speak. So each one tastes a little bit different. We maybe get an apricot crop every three years, I'd say. So time to stock up on apricots. And usually what we do is we try to find people who would like to pick and make jam. Otherwise, we put many of them in the freezer, and then during those off months of the winter, we're lots of times making things out of the apricots. Here's an example of a really heavy producing apricot, but you can see the contrast of the ripe apricots with the unripe apricots. That's really unusual. It's July 12th today, and we usually don't get any apricots until at least August. This year, I don't know if it's the dry weather or what's really going on with them. We got some rain about 10 days ago, and it seemed to be at the point where many of the apricots were just giving up, like saying, okay, I guess I'm ripe because there's no more water. And we got this early crop, but we also have, it seems, a late crop. So we're just kind of along for the ride, observing what nature is doing. It's different every year. And this is like the underestimated. We have picked so many Nanking cherries this year. It's a really great year for cherries. And these are delicious. They're like little flavorful packets of juice. And I think I have 25 pounds in the freezer, and this will be our job for later today, is to be picking more of these Nanking cherries. Loaded with vitamin C, with potassium, with antioxidants. These are the underestimated fruits. So if they're having problems, let's say in the cherry growing regions of Washington or Michigan, sure, they're a little bit small, but they make up for that in flavor. So Nanking cherries are one of those crops that we really like to have. It's pretty effort-free if you've got the pollinators and sufficient rainfall. Quite a few of those on. What I like to look for is the dark green leaves and the dark green berries. Usually that means a really good amount of sweetness. This must be the year for renovation too, because we grow spice currants, golden spice currants, and you can see that this spice currant is ready. Those littler ones will take some time. They sort of turn from yellow to this color to this darker color. And currants don't have like a short season. They just go on and on and on. Here you can see, you can pick those dark purple ones, and then there's lots that aren't quite ripe yet.
Hey, Mary Jo, I've been following along here with you as you've been walking.
Good, Esther.
This is Esther Jordan, by the way. I'm out here at the horticulture display garden as Mary Jo's on her farm at Prairie Horizons. So I was noticing with your apricot trees that some of them have fallen to the ground. And I know that that's kind of a big thing if you have an apple tree, that if those apples have fallen to the ground, you want to get those picked up. Is that the same situation with apricots? Like if they're laying on the ground, you want to try to get those picked up, or can you leave them be?
Actually, we have enough wildlife that help us clean up, and looking at the size of the crop, if we can get the ones that are still on the tree, that's what we're going to do. But we feed an awful lot of wildlife. They come in and clean up. Some of them set up shop just for apricot season. So it isn't a good practice at all to use fruit that has hit the ground. That's a no-no for food safety. So what we would be doing later today is probably going along and seeing like if some of these will come off pretty easily. You see there's a little bit of a green cast to them. In a day or two, those will be dead ripe. So for the ones on the ground, you know, that's typical that we will waste some. And I don't know if it's considered waste when the wildlife gets to eat. They seem to be after the stones more than anything. That's where the protein and fat is in the fruits. But I won't claim to be as ambitious to clean up all of those when we've got this kind of crop still on the tree. Now, as I mentioned, these apricots are sort of a field run. They don't have any variety name or anything, so they vary in quality. And what we're doing is, well, here's one I mentioned that some just look like green olives yet. Those won't be ripe for probably 3 weeks, something like that. And then it will depend on whether we get rain or not. So I think we have not had this big of a crop before, and we will be targeting those still in the trees. Some of them are quite spot free. Some of them have a blemish here or there. Remember, we're an organic orchard, so we don't use any kind of sprays or things. But Esther, if you didn't have anything going on later today, I would just welcome, you know, you come and take from the trees or ground or whatever you want, because there's certainly an abundance here. It's sort of
yeah, it certainly looks that way. We've got some beautiful fruit out there, Mary Jo. Now, is your farm open to the public that they can come out there and purchase, or kind of a self pick, or do you mostly sell your products at the farmers market, as you mentioned?
Every Saturday morning we're open from 9 to 12, and so we have you pick, and we also have our staple, which is all of our cuts of beef. I made some apricot jam. We have that for sale. Yeah, and we hope to really work up those supplies, but our farm store only sells products of the farm on the farm, and that can be kind of a different experience for people who are used to stores offering everything and anything. So we only offer like fresh fruit that's in season. We can't reliably say, okay, come the middle of July every year and get apricots, because we've never had apricots in the middle of July before. So it's the kind of thing that requires us to be in tune with the season and to try to help other people, you know, get in tune with the season. So we put notices on our website, but every Saturday morning, May through October, we are at the farm store, and it would be fine for people to come and pick. If there's nothing ripe at the moment, just walk the orchard, enjoy the farm. There's a lot of things to see, and I mentioned that we added goats. That's my new love, I guess I would say. I must have some ancestral, in fact, I know I do, goat herding experience, and because this is my first year having my own goats, and I like them probably more than is reasonable. So that tells me that there's some kind of tie that I have. I just enjoy them. They fill a real niche on the prairie. I think we will be trying them in the orchard. I know they would love the apricots on the ground, but not this year, because goats can be destructive if your trees are not of the size. The apricot trees certainly are of the size where they wouldn't damage them. However, we would have to protect other kinds of fruit that the goats probably would damage. So Yeah, let me walk through the food forest here a little bit. Here we come to choke cherries, okay? And you see that the choke cherries, they usually hang in big clusters. These will be ripe usually in a couple of weeks. What this tells me is that pollination probably wasn't sufficient on this particular choke cherry bush. Oh, I can hear the apricots dropping as we walk through. Here's one that probably got pollinated a little bit more. Choke cherries are a traditional fruit that many people have depended on, not only my ancestors, but Native Americans who would make pemmican or wasna out of the choke cherries, complete with the pits, which added that essential protein and fat, and pounded with buffalo. So then if you dry the pounded choke cherries with buffalo, really pulverize it, dry it, it will last. It will be a very nutritious, almost all-inclusive food that stores well for long journeys. And we're still into the apricots here. What do you think we should do with all these apricots?
Yeah, I was going to ask you that, Mary Jo. I mean, you can only make so much apricot jam. I mean, what are, I suppose you could dry them. Have you ever done that?
I haven't. No, I wish they dry on the trees though.
Yeah,
And we might.
that would be very convenient, wouldn't it?
Yeah, this is daunting when I see this, and we may not see this for 5 years again. So I guess what we really need is an apricot squad, like a really dedicated group of individuals who understand like the immediacy and immensity of a crop like this. And I think that there is a lot of fruit that may not be utilized, not just in our orchard, but other people's orchards. And somehow the need for fruit has to match the supply of fruit, but I haven't figured out, how that's all going to happen. The choke cherries, I'm going to have to get on the horn to people that I know who like choke cherries, because these, you can see the pollination, they're almost hanging like clusters of grapes. These are nice choke cherries. And we're finding that choke cherries in the wild are disappearing. Couple of reasons, there's more cultivation, so fence lines are disappearing. And also they have a disease sometimes called black knot that we try to be very vigilant of and cut it out because it can become systemic. Now, I don't see any here right now. If I see some, I'll point it out. And so our orchard was started in 2006. It was started by our son, Jerron, who loved fruit and loved sharing fruit. And it became his legacy and ours to continue to build on this. Now that's a pretty tall choke cherry, which they used to be very plentiful. Fence lines would have choke cherries, but because of disease and tillage and maybe a few other factors, they really haven't been very plentiful. We're not an orchard that is based on apples, but we do definitely have many varieties of apples, and most of them are unnamed. We work with a private fruit breeder to find fruits that would do well in an organic system. This is a bush of Saskatoons. They also have a couple of different names, Juneberry, Serviceberry. I think our plan for these is to cut them back, maybe not all the way to the ground. There's a method called coppicing where you can cut them way back, which really improves their productivity. But what happens with serviceberries, Juneberries, Saskatoons, those are all names for these bushes right here, is that the birds love them so much that we must net them. We lose some fruit to birds anyway, but the Saskatoons, they pretty much take it all. They don't leave anything for us. So our game plan here then is to cut them back to improve productivity to the point where we're able to get some bird netting over those Saskatoons. And then down into the orchard, we have some different varieties of grapes. You can probably walk up back this side. We put some conifers in the middle just to control wind and make sure that the fruit trees had a nice hot place to grow, but one that was somewhat sheltered from the wind. Also some bur oak, which are native to the area. And on this side, what I wanted to show you down in the hollow area, after we get back past these very young trees, are peaches. And we don't have any peaches on, but we are trying to grow Minnesota hardy peaches. This, and we dedicate a lot of our trees to relatives who have passed on, and we have quite a bit of deer loss, so we have applied to put some deer worthy fence around the orchard. That'll help us out quite a bit. Let's see, here's an example of a very young tree. And it's a little cherry tree, tiny little cherries on there. Birds love to see that red fruit and they will take it right out. We got some pruning to do. Branches that need to come off. That would be a black ice plum, which are wonderful plums. They get just big and juicy, just like a California plum. But we haven't found them particularly long-lived in our orchard. It's hard to keep them going. So good thing we have sort of an experimental orchard so that we don't depend so heavily on a certain crop. It's just sort of fun to see how different plants grow. And this is our row of peaches. And I mentioned we had a private fruit breeder who helped us with deciding what kinds of stone fruits to put in the orchard. And these are very vigorous, which means, you know, they survive through the winter. But this is where the goats would come in, is this, they need pruning, and I'm not up for this, but when you smell these leaves, it looks very, tastes almondy, but it's a peach leaf. And we have seen some blossoms, those beautiful pink blossoms. But this is, it's a long-term endeavor. Our friend Dave Griffin, who's the fruit breeder, talked us into planting 120 peaches. And unfortunately, 6 months after he did that, he passed away very suddenly. So we were left with his legacy of starting Minnesota peaches. And we haven't given up yet because we've got lots and lots of viable trees, but we need more pruning, more culling. All of those things go with growing fruit.
When is the best time to prune all of that, Mary Jo?
It depends on what kind of crop. You know, if for apples, definitely in the dormant season. For plums, after they have set fruit and after the fruit is off. We also, you know, sometimes you have to, if there's a big heavy crop, like if we'd had plenty of time and ambition, we would have removed some of the apricots from the trees, because usually you get smaller fruit if you get an abundance of fruit. With the peaches, you know, I think anytime we would be walking through the orchard would be a good time to prune them. That's what our fruit breeder often told us, is, you know, it's better to do some pruning than no pruning. Many people, including my, were very afraid to pick up a pruner. But if there's damaged branches, dead branches, if there's branches that are broken off, those need to be pruned anytime you see them. And this is our friend who was the Minnesota peach. Oh, there you see a black raspberry that somehow escaped, or I don't think it's a wild one. No, that looks very much like one that we have growing. So I don't know, I can take you into our little farm store, or how are we doing on time, Esther?
We're good. Yeah, if you got a few more minutes, you want to share something with us, that would be fine.
Okay. Well, we'll walk up over into the orchard. I'll show you across from the orchard where the farm store is. And this is the house where Laverne grew up. We've added some porches down below, and that level used to be below the ground level. This all used to be a very dense grove that we lost in 2012 to some straight line winds. And all of our ash trees became just bent on the ground, and we decided to have a different plan. And so this pond is usually has water in it, actually has wild rice in it. We've restored it to the natural level of the pond, and lo and behold, the rice seeds were in there. But wild rice doesn't grow when there's no water. So we are anxiously awaiting the next rainfall because we're limping along on it. So you can see the orchard shed from there. And with the mainstay of what we do, grass-fed beef, we've got a large outdoor freezer and kind of a plan to use more products of the farm in a way that invites people into that process. We also built a root cellar. One of the things about this particular location is it became very hot. There was not a cool place to be found anywhere. And so we built a lot of places that would be cool. And let me just take a minute here and I'll take you inside the store. There's Roja up there. She's our main farm dog. Retail outlet that we have here, a place for me to concoct recipes. I mentioned that I had made some apricot jam. That would be an example. Some choke cherry jam, some pickles, some garlic that we picked. And our meat case, which is sweating a little bit. So all different cuts of meat. Cattle have always made the rest of what we do on the farm possible. We're working with dairy cattle or now beef cattle. They definitely create the backbone on which we can experiment with fruits and vegetables. In season, then the vegetables would be arrayed in that cooler. And it's a place where people can eat foods of the farm, on the farm. You can see I've got some apricots to do. Oh, if you could smell. They really smell like they're ready to process.
It looks like this keeps you all very busy, Mary Jo.
It does, you know, and as a registered dietitian, one can never have enough sinks. So I've kind of overdone on the sinks, and I'm really intrigued with fermentation. So that's another thing I really want to do more of this week, is more fermentation. Okay, and there's some apricots. So it looks like I better get to work, Esther.
Yeah, you've got a big day ahead of you. I think you mentioned you were going to go out and pick apricots, and you had cherries, and there's pruning. Always something to do on the farm, right?
Yeah, that's right. But you know, the livestock takes precedence, and with the really hot weather, you know, we've always, as a nutritionist, the most essential nutrient is water. And we're certainly finding that in our need to water our livestock more frequently and move them to pastures. So sometimes, truthfully, the fruit and vegetables take second place, but we try to do as much as we possibly can. And we love it. We work hard, but we absolutely love it. It's kind of a combination of a dream come true and one in progress. So that's about what I have to show you today.
All right. Well, thank you so much for taking us on a tour of your farm and showing us what you have available there. And it's great that you open it up to the public, that they can come and check it out as well. Good luck with your tasks today and every day as you head into this summer of
right. Any Saturday. Esther.
All right. Thanks, Mary Jo.
You're welcome.